History remembers Anne Boleyn as a queen who fell, her head severed by the king's command. She is immortalized in the shadow of tragedy, a woman whose ambition and wit could not save her from the ruthless machinery of Henry VIII's court. But imagine a different turn of events. What if Anne had survived that fateful day? What if, rather than being silenced forever, she had escaped her execution, disappearing into the shadows of England or beyond, nursing both her grief and her desire for vengeance? This scenario sets up a striking contrast between history and possibility. In our known timeline, Anne was powerless, stripped of her agency, and ultimately executed. Yet in this alternate reality, she becomes a formidable force, alive and calculating, shaping the fate of the kingdom from behind the scenes. Her survival would not just alter her personal story but threaten the stability of Henry's court, disrupt the religious reforms he so eagerly pursued, and challenge the succession that defined the Tudor dynasty. As Anne embarks on secret exile, plotting her eventual return, we are invited to explore the ripple effects of her survival. How would politics, religion, and dynastic ambitions shift under her influence? This thought experiment opens a world where one queen's cunning and survival could redefine England's history. The headsman's blade falls, but history pauses, and Anne Boleyn vanishes into the shadows. In the blink of an eye, a moment that was meant to mark her end transforms into a turning point. In reality, Anne's execution erased her power and influence, leaving only whispers of her beauty, wit, and tragic ambition. In this alternate history, however, she survives, clever, determined, and more dangerous than ever. Anne's survival begins with ingenuity and the loyalty of a few trusted allies. Perhaps a sympathetic attendant slips a small vial of a sedative into her wine, rendering her seemingly lifeless for the execution. Or perhaps a secret passage, known only to her inner circle, allows her to disappear beneath the castle, unseen by guards or courtiers. Chaos erupts in the court of Henry VIII. Rumors swirl that the queen's execution has failed, or worse, that she has been spirited away. Fear and uncertainty grip nobles, courtiers, and even the king himself. For Henry, a man accustomed to controlling every move of his court, the possibility of a living, plotting, and is deeply unsettling. Once safely beyond England's shores, Anne navigates the intricate web of European politics. France, still sympathetic to her as a former queen and niece of the Valois dynasty through her family connections, offers refuge. Alternatively, the Low Countries, thriving centers of commerce and Protestant thought, provide safe harbors and contacts. Anne's experience at court becomes her greatest asset. She cultivates alliances with influential nobles, ambassadors, and religious figures, leveraging her intimate knowledge of Henry's weaknesses and the political rivalries within England. She begins to plot carefully, moving in the shadows while building the tools necessary for eventual influence and revenge. Exile transforms Anne. No longer a queen at court, she becomes a strategist of extraordinary patience and cunning. Fear and grief harden into resolve, and her intellect sharpens with every interaction and observation. She studies continental politics, masters the art of diplomacy, and learns to manipulate allies and rivals alike. Her motives evolve into a complex web, a thirst for vengeance against the man who wronged her, a desire to protect her daughter Elizabeth and secure her place in the line of succession, and a commitment to advancing Protestant ideals in a kingdom dominated by Henry's shifting religious whims. Each day in exile strengthens her resolve, preparing her for the moment when she will return to England as more than a mere survivor, as a force capable of reshaping her nation. Anne's disappearance sends ripples back to England. The court becomes tense, conspiracies flourish, and Henry grows increasingly paranoid. Courtiers speculate whether the Queen's allies within the country will attempt a daring rescue or if foreign powers might intervene to leverage and survival for their own advantage. Meanwhile, Elizabeth, still a child, is quietly influenced by the lingering presence of her mother's intelligence and determination, even if she does not yet know of Anne's survival. Anne's exile is more than mere survival. It is a crucible that transforms her from a once vulnerable queen into a shrewd political operator with a vision. Each connection she forms, every alliance she forges, is a stepping stone toward a return that could shake the foundations of Henry VIII's court. Her journey through Europe lays the groundwork for an extraordinary tale of cunning, power, and retribution, one that threatens to rewrite the history of the Tudor dynasty entirely. As Anne disappears, Henry VIII's court braces itself, but the cracks in Tudor politics widen unseen. Her absence is felt not only in whispers of fear and rumor but in the subtle tremors of a kingdom whose balance of power depended on her removal. In the historical timeline, Anne's execution solidified Henry's authority, cleared the path for Jane Seymour, and allowed the king to exert uncontested influence over court factions and succession plans. In this alternate reality, however, the king is left with uncertainty gnawing at the edges of his power. Courtiers who once anticipated Anne's downfall now hesitate, uncertain whom to align with, and rival factions sense an opportunity to maneuver in her unseen shadow. Henry's rule grows increasingly paranoid. He trusts few, suspecting that Anne's allies, either within the court or abroad, might conspire to challenge his authority. Decisions that would once have been decisive become hesitant, and the removal of key political obstacles is delayed. Jane Seymour, who historically rose swiftly to prominence following Anne's execution, finds her ascent altered, her marriage to Henry may be postponed, or her political influence diminished, as courtiers and foreign powers re-evaluate loyalties in light of Anne's survival. Succession, always a sensitive issue, becomes a looming crisis. Henry knows that Elizabeth's legitimacy is no longer merely a matter of law and ceremony. The Queen's survival casts a shadow over his plans for heirs and alliances. The religious landscape, too, is unsettled. The Boleyn Reformation, a movement historically intertwined with Anne's influence, now faces uncertainty. Protestant reformers watch from the sidelines, reassessing allegiances and strategies. Some hope for Anne's guidance and protection from afar, while others fear that her survival may provoke a harsher crackdown from Henry. Within the Church of England, reformist gains become fragile. The king's indecision and the nobility's shifting loyalties create openings for both conservative and radical elements. England, which had seemed poised for relative religious consolidation, is instead teetering on a knife's edge, with doctrinal disputes and factionalism simmering just below the surface. Elizabeth's position as Anne's daughter complicates matters further. The young princess, historically destined to inherit the throne in later decades, now becomes a potential pawn and symbol. Her legitimacy is questioned in the court's whispers, yet her mother's influence, though hidden, offers subtle protection. Perhaps Elizabeth is quietly tutored abroad, away from Henry's wrath, or shielded by loyal allies who recognize the importance of keeping her safe until and chooses the moment of her return. The child's future, intertwined with her mother's schemes, becomes a key variable in the unfolding political drama. England's political fragility grows daily. Court factions maneuver cautiously, unsure whether to consolidate power or wait for Anne's eventual move. Succession debates intensify, alliances shift, and the king's paranoia fuels mistrust among his advisors. Religious reforms that once seemed inevitable now face the constant threat of upheaval, as Protestant and conservative forces alike test the boundaries of Henry's authority. All the while, the shadow of Anne's exile lingers like a storm cloud, an invisible presence capable of striking the court with sudden force. The stage is set for a dramatic confrontation. Anne's eventual reappearance promises to tip the scales in ways no one at court can fully anticipate. Political, religious, and dynastic stability hangs by a thread, and the kingdom waits unknowingly for the queen who vanished to return, a force that could reshape alliances, succession, and the very nature of Henry VIII's reign. In this fragile, uncertain England, the absence of Anne is not just a gap. It is a pressure point, primed for the shockwave of her eventual vengeance and influence. Years of plotting, alliances, and whispered secrets culminate in a single, daring act, and Boleyn returns to England. Gone is the vulnerable queen who once trembled before Henry's wrath. In her place stands a woman honed by exile, patient, cunning, and fearless. Her survival has allowed her to master diplomacy, cultivate continental allies, and understand the intricate web of England's political and religious power. Every step of her return is calculated, designed to maximize impact and minimize risk, yet even the boldest plans carry the thrill of danger. Anne's re-entry into England is a spectacle of strategy. She moves through secret channels, aided by loyalists who have waited years for her signal. Spies and sympathizers in the court, those who remembered her intelligence and charm, quietly clear her path and disseminate rumors that unsettle her enemies. Whether she arrives covertly under the cover of night, slipping into London unnoticed, or makes a calculated public appearance at a gathering of nobles to assert her presence, the effect is immediate. Whispers ripple through the court, Anne Boleyn is alive, and she is back. The reactions among Henry VIII's court are swift and chaotic. Nobles, ministers, and advisors panic, unsure how to respond to the queen who was once erased from history. Factions that had assumed stability now scramble for advantage, realigning loyalties in the face of this unexpected threat. Henry himself is caught between rage, fear, and the recognition that Anne's return cannot be ignored. His authority, already strained by court intrigue and religious uncertainty, now faces a personal challenge that threatens to unravel years of political planning. Even those closest to him are forced to reconsider allegiances, unsure whether to side with the king or hedge their bets in anticipation of Anne's maneuvering, and wastes no time reclaiming influence. Drawing on the alliances she forged in exile and the network of loyalists within England, she strategically positions herself to affect key political and religious decisions. Nobles once loyal to Jane Seymour or other court favorites find themselves outmaneuvered, as Anne quietly asserts her sway over succession matters. Elizabeth's future, long in peril due to questions of legitimacy, becomes a central focus. Through calculated manipulation, Anne ensures that her daughter's claim is fortified, undermining rivals and consolidating her own power in the process. Her return sets off a domino effect across the kingdom. Political factions fracture and realign under the weight of Anne's presence. Religious reformers see opportunities to advance their causes through her influence, while conservatives brace for conflict. The delicate balance of power Henry had worked to maintain teeters on the edge of chaos, and the court becomes a stage for intrigue, betrayal, and rapid shifts in loyalty. Anne's combination of intelligence, charisma, and ruthlessness leaves no doubt. She is no longer the queen who fell, but a force capable of bending England to her vision. Anne's return is more than a personal triumph. It is a catalyst for sweeping change. Every alliance she revives, every rival she undermines, and every decision she influences sends shockwaves through the monarchy, religion, and nobility. England, already unstable under Henry's rule, now faces the unpredictable consequences of a queen who refused to be silenced. The stage is set for confrontation, negotiation, and perhaps even conflict. A reimagined Tudor England where one woman's determination could reshape history, secure her daughter's future, and leave the king confronting a power he thought he had destroyed. With Henry's authority shaken and the court in turmoil, Anne seizes the moment, not just for revenge, but to reshape a nation. No longer merely a survivor, she emerges as a formidable architect of England's political and religious destiny. Historically, the English Reformation unfolded slowly, contested at every turn, its outcomes incomplete and fragile. In this alternate timeline, Anne accelerates the transformation, guiding reforms with precision, determination, and an intimate understanding of the monarchy's levers of power. Anne's influence over the Church of England is immediate and profound. Protestant reforms, which historically were often tentative or half-hearted, now gain momentum under her direction. Traditional rituals are curtailed, clergy loyal to reform are elevated, and doctrines that support individual faith and scriptural authority are promoted. Through careful diplomacy and selective enforcement, and ensures that England's religious trajectory diverges sharply from historical precedent. The kingdom becomes a bastion of Protestant thought, not only consolidating its faith internally but projecting influence across Europe, challenging Catholic powers and inspiring reformist movements in the Low Countries, France, and beyond. Court politics, long shaped by Henry's whims and the influence of his ministers, now bend under Anne's hand. Figures like Thomas Cromwell, who once navigated a delicate balance of power, face either her calculated wrath or the necessity of alignment. Loyalties shift rapidly as court factions scramble to understand where Anne's favor lies. Those who resist her influence risk marginalization or dismissal, while those who embrace her vision gain unprecedented access to power. Alliances formed under the assumption of Henry's absolute authority crumble as Anne demonstrates that true political control now extends beyond the throne itself. Dynastic considerations, too, are fundamentally transformed. Elizabeth, historically the daughter of a queen executed for treason, is legitimized both politically and publicly under Anne's guidance. Her claim to the throne is no longer contested, ensuring that the line of succession aligns with Anne's long-term ambitions. Depending on the evolving political landscape, Henry's future heirs may ascend differently than in history, or Elizabeth herself may rise sooner, shaping the monarchy with the unique influence of a mother who refused to be silenced. This consolidation of dynastic power not only secures Anne's legacy but also establishes a new political equilibrium, one that intertwines religious reform with monarchical stability in unprecedented ways. Anne's reforms ripple beyond politics and religion, influencing culture, education, and society. Patronage of scholars, artists, and theologians aligned with Protestant ideals flourishes. Public perception of monarchy shifts as citizens witness a queen who embodies intellect, courage, and vision rather than subservience. England, already a kingdom of strategic importance, becomes a symbol of bold transformation, its power and cultural identity amplified under Anne's leadership. In reshaping England, Anne does more than avenge herself or secure her daughter's future. She fundamentally alters the trajectory of an entire nation. Religion becomes a defining axis of English identity earlier and more decisively than in reality. Court politics are rewritten, succession disputes resolved in her favor, and alliances across Europe recalibrated in response to her bold actions. Under Anne Boleyn's hand, England emerges as a radically Protestant kingdom, politically stable yet fiercely independent, setting the stage for Elizabeth's eventual reign with a legacy both secure and profoundly different from what history once recorded. A queen who once teetered on the chopping block now shapes the culture, religion, and destiny of an empire. Anne Boleyn's survival and strategic return do more than shift political and religious power within England. They reverberate across culture, diplomacy, and global influence. Historically, the Elizabethan Golden Age emerged under her daughter's reign, but in this alternate timeline, Anne's direct influence accelerates and reshapes the trajectory of art, literature, and intellectual life. Court patronage reflects her vision, promoting writers, musicians, and scholars aligned with Protestant ideals. Shakespeare, Marlowe, and other luminaries may find their works influenced by themes of political cunning, female agency, and religious transformation, creating a cultural landscape that diverges sharply from historical expectations. Courtly rituals, fashions, and artistic expressions echo the new values and champions, blending elegance with ideological purpose. Internationally, England's position shifts in ways that would have seemed impossible in history. Alliances are recalibrated to favor Protestant powers on the continent, forging closer ties with the Low Countries, parts of France, and emerging German states. Spain, long a dominant Catholic power, faces a more assertive England aligned against its influence, while France navigates a complex diplomatic balance, wary of Anne's strategic vision and the power she wields through her daughter and loyalists. England's foreign policy becomes proactive and ideologically driven, projecting Protestant influence abroad and challenging the traditional Catholic hegemony of Europe. colonial and religious impacts are equally profound. Protestant migration, settlement, and missionary activity accelerate under Anne's guidance, reshaping the early foundations of overseas colonies. Catholic resurgence in England, historically persistent through covert networks and foreign influence, is suppressed earlier and more effectively, allowing England to consolidate religious and political identity with greater certainty. The global balance of Protestant and Catholic influence shifts, creating ripple effects that touch commerce, exploration, and early empire building. Anne's survival, therefore, is not merely a personal triumph or domestic intrigue. It becomes the fulcrum upon which the trajectory of England and its global role pivots. Politics, religion, culture, and diplomacy intertwine in a reimagined Tudor world, where one queen's determination transforms not only her nation but the broader European and colonial stage. The England that emerges is radically different, its legacy redefined by the enduring intellect, ambition, and vision of Anne Boleyn. One queen's survival could have rewritten centuries of history, changing England, Europe, and the world. Anne Boleyn, once executed and erased from power, becomes in this alternate timeline the architect of a Protestant revolution, a master strategist, and the matriarch of a reimagined Tudor legacy. Her cunning escape, years of exile, and calculated return reshape the court of Henry VIII, destabilizing factions, influencing succession, and securing her daughter Elizabeth's future with unprecedented precision. Religious reforms accelerate under her guidance, cementing England as a firmly Protestant kingdom long before history would have allowed. Political alliances shift, international diplomacy realigns, and cultural life flourishes under her vision, creating an England that is both politically formidable and culturally dynamic. The butterfly effect of Anne's survival ripples through every facet of society. The monarchy, religion, arts, exploration, and global Protestant influence are all dramatically altered. Her return challenges the very notion of historical inevitability, showing how a single life, one act of survival, could pivot the course of empires. As we reflect on this alternate Tudor world, the question remains, how different would the world look if Anne Boleyn had lived to claim her revenge? Her story reminds us that history is fragile, and sometimes the smallest change can echo across centuries.